Transformers The Last Night. So I'm gonna do similarly here to what I did with Alien Piece, because I do have to publish a review for this on theyoungfolks.com. They'll probably go up at the same time, but blah blah blah. So a little backstory here. I grew up with the 90s Transformers, the Beast Wars ones in particular. Liked those a lot. Kind of had a reinvigorated interest 10 years ago when the first of these movies came out, and I actually still have a poster from the premiere. It was my first Michael Bay movie I'd ever seen. I was 15, and robots, cars, cool, funny shit is like, you know, the kind of thing that was made for a 15-year-old that wanted to be into science fiction. It's been a painful experience ever since. Notably, the second Transformers movie was painful to watch. The third one, I fell asleep. The fourth one is the only movie in my entire lifetime of 25 years going to the movies that I have walked out in the middle of. It was so bad. I told myself I wouldn't go see a fifth one. That was, you know, with the understanding that I would be paying for it, but here I am. I went to the press screening last night, and god damn, I forget how much people love these movies. So the problem with this movie is that it is 2.5 hours long, and despite the fact that it's the fifth time around where you have world-ending stakes, feels largely inconsequential. It is the first time seeing a Transformers sequel, because I haven't watched it in a while, but at least that first one was still pretty watchable as like a film. It felt Spielbergian in spirit to me when I saw it. And having grown up on Spielberg films, I liked that aspect, and that's de-escalated since then. But this fifth film had something going for it in there somewhere, deep inside. Whether it was just like a kernel of an idea in the screenplay writing, or something in the performances, maybe. And instead, the storytelling is all over the place. And the concept is a very, actually quite interesting prologue, where you have Arthur and his knights, and gladiator-esque opening sequence with a battle in a field, and dirt and blood and catapults and shit. And you're supposedly going to have an encounter with this wizard Merlin. Merlin, a second character in this series played by Stanley Tucci, is actually a crook, I guess. I don't know. And he seeks the aid of these ancient Transformers, because there's always ancient Transformers. And as it turns out, that's the source of power of mysticism in these old Arthurian tales. Quite frankly, the whole prologue piece made me wonder if an entire film of this Transformers series set in this medieval time, in the dark ages, or even as a crossover with He-Man, could be legible or even cool. And it makes me wonder what Michael Bay could possibly do with a film that is limited in that way. But we very quickly move to modern day, and it's just a bunch of the same shit all over again. I come from the school of thinking where when you have a story to tell, there's no excuse. You can't just make something dumb and excuse it for being what it is, because I expect more from that when a movie costs hundreds of millions of dollars. You can at least have a decent script and a decent editor. The production value in Michael Bay's movies, fine. There's been a lot of analysis on what Michael Bay's directing style is and how it functions and why it's successful, and that's fine. You know what? The way that he directs action scenes, while they may be a little overlong, they work as action scenes, but when he's in charge of putting together the rest of a film, close-ups are too close in. There's too much movement behind and in front of cameras when somebody's trying to speak. You never have a shot that's on screen more than 3 seconds, maybe. When you think that there's going to be a moment where a character has something important to say or feel or do, it's immediately interrupted by something that's supposed to be a goofy gag or some kind of weird sexual tension or whatever. It just doesn't make any sense. And I think that Michael Bay understands productions, and he understands systems, and he understands how to make a movie. But the poor guy just doesn't understand people. These films have no ability to convey character. And when you have actors as great as Anthony Hopkins, and you cast him because he's got a dope British accent, and he says these bizarre things that could only ever be said in a Michael Bay movie. You think, to what end? Why are we doing this with this actor with this amount of money? I obviously understand that he agreed to do it because it's probably a damn good paycheck, but what are we doing here? To loop it back to that prologue piece, basically the movie takes an hour to set up after that in this 2.5-hour film, because you have a lot of things to introduce that ultimately don't really mean a whole lot. So you have to reintroduce Mark Wahlberg as Cade Yeager, the inventor. He's the inventor guy. So he's in a hideout with a bunch of the Autobots. Optimus Prime is lost in space. Anthony Hopkins is introduced as a guy that is the holder of some kind of ancient British lineage to protect this weird medallion MacGuffin, the MacGuffin of this 5th film that at least this time around isn't the source of the Transformers power. And then Megatron is after it. So Megatron comes out of hiding. The military, which that portion of the movie has dragged Josh Duhamel back into these movies, decides to cut a deal with Megatron to get some of his, more personable Decepticons back into the wild, and steal this medallion so that they can track Cade Yeager and the Autobots. But as it turns out, in the meantime, you have Anthony Hopkins' character and his British servant. The movie seems like it's going along one way, and then it's stopped dead by this robot butler who serves Anthony Hopkins, and his name is Cogman because he looks like a Transformers cross between Cogsworth from Beauty and the Beast and C-3PO. He just kind of takes Mark Wahlberg, yanks him up from his plot line. Poor Laura Haddock, who a lot of people know from playing Peter Quill's mother in the Guardians of the Galaxy films. She's in this as the designated sexy girl, and she gets yanked up from the 2 scenes that she's introduced, and then they get thrown together in this mansion, and then there's about a half hour of exposition and useless gags with this Cogman character, until they realize that there is a staff that is Transformers power, and it was the staff of Stanley Tucci's Merlin. And one person is chosen to do one thing, one person is the descendant of another thing, and like I said, it takes over an hour to set up what is actually supposed to be going on in this movie. And then there's a couple of other twists, including cameos by John Turturro, God bless him for still doing these, until all the puzzle pieces get back together. It's just an absolute mess, and the pacing is way off, and then, oh right, I forgot. There's another part where there's a girl who used to be on who's been on Disney TV shows. Her name's Isabella Moner. She plays a character also named Isabella, and she's basically supposed to be a daughter figure for Mark Wahlberg, and because his daughter from the 4th movie isn't in this for some reason, and I don't know, it's kind of weird. There was a moment where it felt like it could get back to this Spielbergian feeling again. Particularly with this girl doing a hell of a job trying to act her ass off across from Mark Wahlberg. I don't care. You have to get out of here. I'm taking care of the Autobots. You know how to fix an Autobot jugular? I don't think so. Yeah. There's 3 or 4 different subplots to this movie. A couple of them don't go anywhere. And like I said, there's a lot of interruptions to introduce concepts that ultimately are meaningless. And the only saving grace of it all is the production value and the scope of the set pieces for the action. Basically, you have a problem with Michael Bay movies, where you have all these pieces that could be put together as something good. But then even if you took the raw cut of that movie into the editing room and tried to splice it down, you would realize how much of a mess it is, not just structurally. You can't just take scenes out and put them into different places to make it seem like it's paced a little better, because there is so much of it that is so completely meaningless. The pacing of everything is immediately ruined by the inclusion of a gag. It's all constantly overlapping with each other. The moments in between your action scenes are more stressful and fatiguing than the action scenes themselves. So, yeah. And then there was another subplot where Optimus Prime, again lost in space, ends up back on the original Cybertron, and then like the trailers are conveying, he's corrupted into being an evil transformer, turned into what is called Nemesis Prime, and he's maybe in the movie for about 15 minutes. Which is whatever. Peter Cullen's got to get paid, right? Ultimately, I guess, despite its problems, I can at least say that it's the best of these Transformers movies since the first one. It's the most watchable of them since the first one. It's the least insufferable of them since the first one. I don't expect more from these, but when you have this long of a series and you've had this much fan feedback and you get script writers for once, because you got one scriptwriter who worked on Black Hawk Down and two that worked on the original Iron Man, you would think that you could finally get to a point, like Fast and Furious did, where you have a kernel of good storytelling somewhere in there. And nope, Michael Bay just throws it all out the window, because ultimately, this isn't meant to cater to us. It's supposed to cater to China and the foreign market. And that's exactly what the problem was with The Mummy, and that flopped. But I think that in this case, it's going to perform gangbusters, I guess. I don't know. So, yeah, we're all doomed, because this is the future of movies. I don't even really know what else to say about it. It's a mess. It's a watchable mess, but I would never tell somebody to subject themselves to it. No, none of the moments of comedy really work, except for maybe a handful. It overstays its welcome by maybe almost an hour. Actually, I think my friend, when we got out of the theater last night, he said if the plot of this one movie with all of that stuff going on, if the plot of this one movie was split into a single trilogy, that could have been kind of cool. But you have too much Michael Bay-ness. You have too much care about how individual shots look and how well things cut together. And ultimately, the entire piece is detrimented from that kind of overstimulated visual storytelling. Considering how many other movies have come out this year, Guardian's going to be on VOD in August now. Wonder Woman is still playing. It Comes at Night is still playing. You got Spider-Man coming in a couple of weeks. Later this week, I'm going to be seeing War for the Planet of the Apes, and I'm going to be seeing Baby Driver. There's so many other movies coming out this year that are so much more worth your time than this. And I mean, if you catch it on cable, sure. If you want to rent it on Redbox or watch it on like Hulu, fine. But for something that's supposed to be a big IMAX experience, and there's so many of them available to you now, I have to ask, why go see Transformers anymore? Unless it's got a compelling story to tell, or it's got something new to say in regards to the way that it's made, it's pointless. The entire thing is pointless. Go see a better movie, please. Save your money and save Hasbro of the time, because if people don't go and see it, then maybe they'll get a fucking clue for once.